Hey guys. So it's a bit confusing that my name isn't Dave like everybody else. So I will forgive Dave for calling me Tom. It's actually Peter. Yeah, I'll also forgive him for using all of my time on the coin toss game. Glassdoor is tricky. Good night. All right, we're good. We have some time left. So yeah, thrilled to be here, and I thoroughly enjoy being the CEO of Values Culture, and most of our time is spent talking about engagement and assembling rich data through platforms like TinyPulse, and then a small portion of the time is devoted to seeing how that wonderful data set can be leveraged, and the trust that gathering data like that and acting on it builds to leverage that trust and have your story be told by employee ambassadors in social media. So getting the word out there on Glassdoor, where all those eyes are. You told me that this would be easy. I'm sure it is. There we go. Awesome. So Dave already kind of stole the thunder on the Who Loves Glassdoor. There was like 0 heads in the room. So I'll do a different vote. In spirit of the new TinyPulse functionality, I'll do a multiple choice question. So do you think, and the 3 answers are, the 3 questions are right there, like show of hands, who sees Glassdoor as primarily this thing? So option number 1, a venue for rants. Show of hands. All right, pretty popular answer. How about, is it primarily a source for early warning signs of cultural debt? Cultural debt, you guys are all raising your hands. For those who haven't familiar with the term, it's a perception in an employee base that promises have been broken. So final count on the number 2. Okay, oh, great, awesome. And then finally, a powerful employer branding tool. All right, cool. So the second answer was most popular, but we got a few votes for the latter. And I would definitely fall into this camp of believing that Glassdoor can be an amazingly powerful employer branding tool. And as Dave said, love it or hate it, it's here to stay. So why not embrace? And we'll talk about some ways to navigate through today. So hopefully you'll have lots of actionable takeaways. I might even shoot for more than one, but I'll try not to overwhelm you. I'll be at the Gene Spar afterwards as well, and we also have some good time for Q&A. So let's talk about navigating this thing. Oh, cool. Thank you. Thanks. So just real quick on Values Culture's kind of core offering, specializing in basically helping organizations get to their cultural truth in a very fundamental way, nicely complemented by a platform like TinyPulse, which is more for your ongoing evolution, because culture is never fully static. But a lot of the work Values Culture does is about getting to the truth, gathering lots of data sets, including employee surveys, and seeing what you can build your employee promises around. And some of the products that were built were inspired by the work at MediaMath, where we were lucky enough to be this frequent winner on Glassdoor's Best Place to Work list. And it became quite the asset. We had people coming to MediaMath for pay cuts because they were just impressed by the culture. We had a lot of candidates talking about Glassdoor in positive ways as a reason why they maybe applied. And we even had people who didn't have a clue what MediaMath did coming to us, kind of based on the culture. I had one woman on a plane see my little MediaMath logo on my hoodie and say, "I've no clue what your company does, but I know you're an awesome place to work." So the branding potential is there, and getting to the crux of it isn't, or to making it successful isn't impossible. So background on me. Accent isn't terribly strong, so I'll just let you know what the origins are. I actually came to America based on a misunderstanding. I was 11 years old at the time, having a nice beer at the local pub in my small town, and I see behind the bar they had this beautiful antique sign from America. It was this want ad. And I thought, man, this is awesome. automatic jobs for the Irish with no need to go through the application process. Score. So over I came. Turned out to be a broken cultural promise. It wasn't actually true, but forged a career in human capital, or human capital, did someone say earlier? Yeah, I should stop saying human capital, in people. And you know, the journey took me to a lot of different industries and a lot of different sub-functions within HR, and then I was lucky enough to be a chief people officer in a position to, you know, affect real change and some culture curation. This is a Josh Burson slide about, you know, the average company on Glassdoor. And it's not the prettiest of pictures because of, you know, some of the votes for a venue for ranting. And I think, you know, to a large extent, Media Math didn't get to the great place by doing anything super duper special, but maybe just by being intentional about the Glassdoor conversation and embracing it with the same intention that we did our internal culture conversation. So I like to call it a connected culture conversation. So this is the 2017. Emperor's New Clothes is the image. But we're living in a very transparent world. So, you know, you can be in denial about it, or you can embrace. So some of the content I'll cover in the next little bit is rationales that might appeal to different stakeholders for investing a bit more in the Glassdoor conversation. And when I say investing, and this is when I'm glad Glassdoor is not in the room, I'm not talking about buying all their, you know, fancy, paid page privileges or the job ads. Basically, all of the counsel I'll offer today is free. So this is stuff you can do with a free Glassdoor page, the one that you maybe, it's free, but you wish it didn't exist. Well, it does exist. So you might as well make the most of your free profile. So we'll talk about a little bit of a roadmap. So this, you know, I think is just context, and this is like a no-brainer slide for this audience who's already so invested in the connected culture conversation. And it might even seem a bit regressive. Talks there at the end about every 6 months, you know, doing surveys. We know in 2017 that's, you know, not enough. But this is, unfortunately, sort of quote that or the data or the recommendations that I'm still giving to audiences in 2017. I had a Silicon Alley crowd together not too long ago, a few weeks back in Manhattan, and these were all tech companies, you know, super progressive, and I asked them the question, so how many of you guys are doing surveys, pulse surveys, any kind of, you know, formal feedback loop in that way, anonymous surveys? Only about 40% of that room, which should have been, you know, super progressive, Manhattan, Silicon Alley. So for that audience, every 6 months would have been huge progress. But anyway, I skipped through some bullets. So I guess this is the hygiene cycle. Once you've got to a good place in terms of maybe defining your values, like some of the other speakers emphasize the importance of that, and having them be unique and true to your culture. Then open up a feedback loop. And, you know, get the team's feedback on how things are going, share the results, super important, and then, you know, explain why you're doing what you're doing. At Media Math, we had a ton of great data. Wasn't super well organized because think 2011, pre-Tiny Pulse, it was like a SurveyMonkey, and then trying to get all that data out of SurveyMonkey into PowerPoint, and that was like this whole, you know, process, which meant that when we finally delivered the data to stakeholders, it was already like a month or 6 weeks old. But I digress. But do get the story together, and then explain it back to the team, why you're doing what you're doing. Like we had like 20 suggestions that the team would come up with. And we'd say, okay, for budgetary reasons, we can't do number 1, which might have been, you know, double everyone's salary or whatever. But then what we can do numbers 2, 3, and 4 that are, you know, definitely popular. We will invest in these. We'll have, you know, teams, Tiger teams established around them, and make some headway. And, you know, we need your help. We're going to invest in this. Let's do this. And we would be very disciplined about doing that every 6 months. And when we would engage our team, new team members for the first time, who maybe hadn't had the benefit of seeing this cycle of positive action based on the most popular needs or opportunities, we would tell them. So a couple of other speakers emphasized the importance of marketing. I wish we had called ourselves, our culture, Orange or something cool like that. And we didn't, but we did do a decent job at saying, okay, we do this thing every 6 months, and we ask everybody in the team what the priorities are. And then here's a list of things that have come to pass based on this feedback. And the list, every 6 months would grow longer and longer because we'd done all these things over the history of the company. So it was, I think, helpful to do that marketing. It built trust. People who were new began to immediately buy into the process, and we always had 80% plus participation in surveys because there was all this evidence of a historic wall of wins, if you will, and we, framed it as us listening, investing in the employee experience, not HR is awesome. That could have been annoying, but it was like, you've told us what you needed, we've tried to facilitate change, and we're going to keep on working on it with you. So I would recommend that. Even if you're small, you can't afford a marketing headcount, like Exact Target was able to do early in the game, which is so awesome. At least maybe you can get your marketing head on as an HR professional, kind of have your marketing mindset, for a few hours each week, and you'll be glad you did. And then, I think the rationale, to segue to that point about trying to maybe indoctrinate leaders, stakeholders, purse holders into the investment in this conversation. Good old Josh Burson again comes to the rescue, where we have 82% of respondents in the Human Capital Trend Survey saying that culture for sure is a potential competitive advantage, but only 19% think that their organization has the right culture. So it's just this huge opportunity for those who want to be intentional about this. So got some tough stakeholders, maybe a very outcome-oriented business stats-oriented CEO. These can be some helpful points in terms of winning over their help. And what you're trying to win over as well isn't just investment. It actually isn't investment at all, because I don't think you have to pay for Glassdoor. But it's their time, being part of this conversation and being part of the affecting change. So most growth organizations, or even anyone who's hiring, is going to have some sense that reputation does matter. If I've often use the line, if you're a CEO and you're at a shareholder meeting and somebody raises a concern, would you just say, next question, and not answer that person in an open public forum? I don't think so. But if you fail to do that in a public setting like the always-on anonymous survey called Glassdoor, your reputation may suffer. You're also maybe just want to defend some of the lies they're telling about you. But definitely you want to engage in the conversation. Relationships. I like this quote from Roosevelt that people won't, care how much you know until they know how much you care. That resonates with some people. And the fear one is cognitive dissonance. Just this, current team members think that everything is great, and then they have a look at your Glassdoor page, and they're like, oh my God, maybe we do suck. And look at all these other companies who are on the best place to work list. Yeah, the grass probably is greener. So anything you can do to minimize that kind of cognitive dissonance is probably a good investment of effort. And then revenue. So this is a close topic to my heart. The revenue one, or at least the boardroom reference in there, that increasingly Glassdoor is something that investors will look at, is how MediaMath began to be intentional about this. It was 2012, and Glassdoor wasn't as big of a thing back then. It was certainly known, and we had some reviews on there, but they weren't terrible, and we were more than the average. We were 3.2, the average being 3.1. So we didn't really pay too much attention to it until a boardroom conversation where it was brought to our attention that our 3.2 kind of sucked. So kind of sobering for me, for a boardroom conversation to go in that direction in 2012. But I had some solace in the fact that we were already doing this, granted on SurveyMonkey, it was kind of clunky, but we were already gathering the feedback. And we had a good confidence level that we could tell a better story on Glassdoor because 89% of the team was saying that they would wholeheartedly work for MediaMath and recommend it to a friend. Sorry, recommend it to a friend, like an NPS question. And the stat on Glassdoor at that time with a tiny handful of statistically insignificant reviews was 64%. So I was able to go to the team. We're small enough for everyone to kind of attend the same all-hands meeting every week at the time. And I was like, hey guys, so we're all hiring like crazy, and we're doing cool stuff here. The world is seeing this 64%, and we think that could be a source of friction in the talent acquisition process. But you guys just told us in the last survey a few weeks ago that you're 89% referring MediaMath to a friend. So shall we, data-centric folks, MediaMath is an ad tech company, so well aware of ExactTarget and the great work they do. Shall we correct this data issue of the 64% to 89% delta? And people stepped up, and it was clearly framed from me and from other leaders, thankfully, who were joining the conversation, as not being any kind of whitewashing, thing of trying to dress us up as something we're not. All we wanted to do was have there be some similarity between the internal story about our culture and the external story, so connecting the culture conversations. And people stepped up. And we didn't quite get to 89% on Glassdoor overnight. Took a few quarters, but not too much more prodding. We had so few reviews in the beginning that any 4 or 5 star review saw our average coming up quite quickly. And before we knew it, in December 2013, we were the number 6 place per Glassdoor, number 6 SMB in the country, and number 2 in New York, with just leveraging another credible data source. You could also use Tiny Pulse to say, hey, you guys are telling us this. Wouldn't it be nice if Glassdoor was, somewhat in sync with that? Again, don't want to make it better, but just like the truth. So that 3.2 and the boardroom conversation was a little icky to go through, but it led to a very good outcome. Cool. So that was sort of high-level stakeholder engagement, convincing folks of the merits of them stepping in, and leaders responding to reviews and such. So then we'll get into more tactics, and there'll be plenty more tactics to come in the presentation as well. So, responsiveness proved to be an important thing, like the shareholder meeting, just getting back to people. Fine to defend if you are having somebody see the glass a bit too, half empty, and then very cool to assert, hey, actually, we don't have no diversity on our leadership team. We have this level of diversity on the leadership team, and here's a link to the website or whatever, where you've got solid proof that somebody's just saying an incorrect thing about you. Definitely correct it in a gentle way. You're entitled to your opinion. Maybe you're out of date. You worked here a while ago. You didn't know that we just hired all this wonderful new talent. So definitely okay to respond with corrections of incorrect things. Other constructive feedback, my counsel and the plan we followed was to, be humble and say, not negate that person's opinion, even if we really disagreed with it. If there wasn't like hard evidence, like the executive team diversity thing to counter a point, then say, hey, I'm sorry you had that experience. We never would want for somebody to, come away from working with us feeling that way. And here's some of the things we do to combat that. I'm sorry that those strategies weren't strategies you felt. So, quick pause for Q&A. I'll do the Q, you'll do the A. Show of hands, how many of you are answering reviews, either employee reviews or candidate reviews? Show of hands on Glassdoor. Okay, actually not that many. Less than half the room, maybe a quarter. So if you want some quick wins, that could be the great place to start, just to engage in the conversation. In the Q&A section, we can talk about maybe why some of you haven't, jumped in. Be interested to hear some stories. So, positive storytelling, even with the free membership of Glassdoor, free, all the tax it causes on your soul, but the financially free membership, you can put great photos on there. You've got a certain amount of real estate in terms of where you can write copy about your latest and greatest investments in the employee experience, what a great place you are to work. If it's based on hard data you have from the team, all the better. Nothing too aspirational. Maybe should be on there. All bulletproof stuff on your Glassdoor assets and copy. Good to show maybe the full geographic diversity of teams, not to be too headquarters focused. I'd say in your photos, show every office ideally, and in your copy as well, the more inclusive you can be of the different variety of subcultures and experiences within your company, the better. That might even reassure people if there is this one pocket of the company that's terribly unhappy and the Glassdoor reviews are terrible, people will be reminded that it's not just that little unhappy team. You've got a bigger group. And then, enlisting engagement can be the trickiest one. If we could do another show of hands, safe space here, bless you. How many have asked their team to engage in the Glassdoor conversation and do an employee review? Okay. All right, cool, several dozen. So that can be, for those who maybe didn't raise your hands, it's okay to do that. Because Glassdoor and the average score is 3.1, there is a tendency for the less happier folks to get on there. The Yelp effect or general, feedback review kind of sites. I think it's 7-to-1, the ratio. You're 7 times more likely to do a review if you're unhappy than you are if you're happy. So that's kind of the uphill struggle you're facing. So getting on and asking employees to do reviews seems fair. That's what we did at MediaMath to correct a data issue, not just to dress ourselves up as something we weren't. If you've got some other reliable source of data that suggests the Glassdoor overall is wrong, feel bold about asking people to tell their true story. If Glassdoor says you're perfect and the internal data says you're not, then that doesn't quite work. But hey, how cool is that Glassdoor says you're perfect? I think that when you've built some trust, don't be shy about asking people to engage. You can be careful maybe about who you ask to engage and targeted for a couple of reasons. If you just step up at a meeting like this, town hall, 200 people in the room, oh guys, let's do better on Glassdoor in terms of telling our story. Doesn't have to be all positive, thanks so much, laters. You might not get a whole lot of people finding time out of their busy days. Again, 2017, we're all super busy, super connected, can't escape our email, our Slack. Even just getting the 10 minutes together to write a review can be a lot to ask. You're battling some inertia and busy people. But a targeted approach can be more effective. I'll give an example, several examples later, but I'll start with one. So if you're in growth mode or, again, doing any kind of hiring, you have people who will be just a little bit more invested in the employer brand than others, namely your hiring managers who desperately need some help. So if you were to include a request to do Glassdoor review as part of an existing conversation or process with a hiring manager, that can be quite effective. It certainly worked well for us and for clients currently. So it's a give and take thing, and Adam Grant speak. So you've got this recruiter who's making the hiring manager's life easier by finding them people and doing it in a very thorough way. They're having a kickoff meeting. They talk about profiles, how they're going to update the spec from last time, so it's a perfect hire for the current skill gaps in the team. Next steps are agreed to with the hiring manager and the recruiter. So by next Tuesday, I'll have all these candidates. We'll look at that. We'll refine the focus, keep on looking. And the recruiter's doing 80% of the work. The hiring manager has some work to do in terms of maybe language for some bullet point in the job spec or providing some more profiles for lookalike modeling. But basically, the recruiter's providing great service. It's okay for them to add to that conversation. Okay, so before next Tuesday, when we look at the first crop of profiles, could you do a Glassdoor review, Mr. or Ms. hiring manager. You know what it's like to work in the group. We want the profile of the team to be out there in the world. So please, tell your story. And then after the meeting, they find from the same recruiter a link in their inbox to the Glassdoor. Not just to Glassdoor, but to the specific link that brings them straight into write a review for that company. So make it easy for the hiring manager who'll be more motivated than most to take action, make it easy for them to invest the 10 minutes. So, and it's not just this random request out of the blue for Glassdoor, it's part of an existing conversation, and a conversation where the hiring manager is the beneficiary of more of the, the overall process than the partner from the enabling function. So, would definitely enlist engagement with any audience that would be more prone to engage than the other busy person. And maybe your data from Tiny Pulse might even suggest which teams are the most gung-ho, shall we say, about being at your company. That could be another group to target. So. With my clients, we do a pretty detailed Glassdoor roadmap where there's monthly deliverables and action items and tools and templates and model emails and stuff. But this is not rocket science. You could totally do this. So I'll flash up a quick slide on the sample roadmap and just think of yourself doing this. Insert the word you instead of values culture, and it's not crazy complicated. Just a matter of giving it some attention. So establishing a point of view about what you're trying to achieve is important, some kind of a plan. And maybe that plan is to have the Glassdoor representation of your organization be on par with the internal data that you're already gathering. And why are you doing that? Maybe for all the reasons mentioned to date, reducing friction in the recruiting process. Also, minimizing that cognitive dissonance between reality and what Glassdoor might be saying if it's bad for the current team who might be being told the grass is greener. Investors, all the different stakeholders where you'd be better off if this was more accurate. So. Get a plan together and say, hey, we're going to not want money to pay Glassdoor, but what we are going to do is try and engage the executive team in this conversation. So they're responding to reviews and taking the time out of the day, and it's an expectation to go into this conversation on Glassdoor all in. And it's worth their time for those same reasons. On the busy executives, if we were to skip ahead to the second bullet point or on the top, you can still make it easy for them. You're like, so there's the bad news. You want these voices, many voices in the mix representing the company, but we're going to make it easy for them. We know what's going on in the business as your HR partners, so we will ghostwrite their responses for them. And we'll even have a SLA on how quickly we do that, whatever is achievable based on the bandwidth of your team. Maybe it's the same week, maybe it's within 48 hours. And these are not that hard to do. But you're probably better at it, and culture speak, than some of your managers are. So would highly recommend you offer that to take some of the fear out of busy executives being pulled into this conversation. And there's another reason why it shouldn't be HR who's answering these questions, or maybe even why it might be the CEO who's answering the questions. I mean, some companies are extremely proud of the fact that the CEO answers every question on Glassdoor. I actually don't recommend that, because the CEO is several levels kind of above the day-to-day, where they might not actually be able to affect change. If you've got an engineer who's complaining about the tech debt and maybe the cultural debt, and they're frustrated by the code base or whatever, then the CEO saying, "Oh, we're working on it." Maybe the CEO isn't even a particularly technical person. That won't resonate. But if there's somebody who is closer to the action and will be motivated and invested in their team not being so unhappy with the status quo, if they jump on there and respond to the review and speak to real things that their peers will have seen, reforms that are going on in the organization and maybe in the product roadmap or the tech stack, then, oh, okay, that actually, might be true. So, if there is CEO involvement, I think that's wonderful. Maybe it's a default if the person doesn't say what department they're in, and the questions, don't lend themselves to, identifying the person's department being outed by the topics they choose, or if it's a really big picture thing, like for the vision of the company. So definitely use CEOs, and maybe ghostwrite for them to make it easier for them to engage. But I'd say use your CEO sparingly. Another team to use sparingly is HR. Because of natural kind of cynicism. Again, if it's an HR team question where somebody on the HR team is concerned, definitely have your chief people officer, VP people, do the same thing as I mentioned for the engineering case. But otherwise, it's kind of like, shouldn't the most relevant voice be answering that? So we can maybe do better as the ghostwriters, and people also just get skeptical if there's too much HR on Glassdoor in general, both in terms of reviewers saying, oh, everything's great, or responding for other leaders when they aren't in as much of a position to affect change. So if you can kind of downplay the HR visibility a little bit, I think that's also a smart move. Where you want engagement, even if it's heavily facilitated by HR behind the scenes, is in getting the whole leadership team involved. So to skip back, I guess this maybe you might have seen the connected culture conversation theme here. Super important to just be thinking about your internal, maybe tiny pulse data or other pulse data, kind of in unison with the Glassdoor conversation. They're really two sides, ideally, of the same coin. One of them will be statistically significant, tiny pulse. One of them won't. I don't know if any company ever even gets 10% of its team to respond to do reviews on Glassdoor. It's pretty rare. The far better data will be internal. But just to keep on mirroring the same talking points, perhaps. So if you have these great achievements and wall of wins from your work on Tiny Pulse, showcase those same things be a marketer again on Glassdoor. So you can maybe cut and paste that email like the one I did at MediaMat saying, look at all the stuff we did based on your requests. And as appropriate, without tooting your horn too much, that's content that can also live well on Glassdoor. Cool, getting close to the pre-Q&A section. I will touch on the team engagement on Glassdoor, verbal requests. If you're just dipping the toe in because you're kind of scared of Glassdoor, if it looks pretty toxic on there, baby steps. Start with managers maybe in happier groups, verbally asking for folks to engage on Glassdoor on their teams. And it'll be situational. So if you've got folks who are hiring, that's definitely fair game. Teams that might have just brought in some talent and they've finished hiring and they're like breathing a sigh of relief that they now actually have the resources they need, that might be another pocket of optimism. So, it's all about maybe not being afraid and boldly getting on there, asking folks who might be somewhat inclined to be optimistic to engage. So there's the hiring managers. The two more H's, happy people. They're great. If you see smiling faces going around and your overall Glassdoor score is non-representative of what your internal data is saying, ask for the happy people's help. And again, make it easy for them with that, no pressure to say nice things. It should just be a true picture, our story, as you see it, but get that link into their email box. And your team can be part of that effort. The stronger their relationship with the stakeholder, the happy person, the better. Just more trust, less skepticism. And then the third H, what was the third H? So we got, honeymooners. So people who are less, steeped in the baggage of the past and maybe, cultural scar tissue that you've fixed maybe or attempted to fix recently using Tiny Pulse. But they just don't have that because they've only been in the company for 3 to 6 months, like long enough to know what it's like to work there, but less baggage that might hold them back. Honeymooners can be a great source of leveling off your Glassdoor story, getting maybe some positives to balance out a negative situation you might be facing. So. And with all of these, you can help these managers engage their teams by providing some talking points, which you can craft, again, maybe cutting and pasting any marketing materials you've done before to show that you care. Is a smart thing. And then you can build a plan where you're looking to have a certain level of engagement on Glassdoor. You can measure it in terms of scores. You can't really control it. You can hope for the best. But certainly review volume is something you can shoot for by doing some of these calls to action with different stakeholders who'll be maybe more likely than the average busy person to take action. Great. So at this point, would love to, with Dave's help, open it up to some Q&A from the audience.
Great, and there's a lot in here. So again, just as a reminder, those of you that have not yet done so, go to Slido, it's sli.do, and you can interact a little bit more. My screen has just gone blank, but one of the questions that had been asked was, have you had success going into Glassdoor and responding to negative feedback by simply just saying in a polite way, well, you're wrong, and what are some of the pros and cons of that?
Okay. Yeah, I think occasionally the you're wrong is the right answer. And if you've been, flat out, accused of things which are provable as incorrect with data, which you're willing to quote, then I would say, use in a polite way. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, you could say, oh, maybe you didn't notice the following thing had changed since your time with us, or maybe you're still with us, but you still hadn't noticed. Yeah, I think that's okay to defend, falsehoods, but in a way that gives them the benefit of the doubt that they just didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I think the pro there is you're protecting your brand so that you don't have this unanswered falsehood, accusation out there for everyone to see, and for the organization to seem like they don't care about this terrible thing being, accusation being leveled at them, or maybe that this thing is true because they've chosen not to respond. The last word is this negative review. So I think there's lots of good reasons to take action there.
So let me take that one step further, because there's a lot of comments in here around how do I deal with those angry rants, the negative feedback, and I think somebody asked simply here, why respond to them in general? Why not just let them go?
Right. So I think there's merit in responding because it shows you care, but there are limits to maybe what you should respond to. There's some kind of rabbit holes you don't want to go down. Character assassination stuff, maybe just about how the CEO is so terrible and there's not even any, and they're just talking about character flaws and whatever, and there's no particular substantial response that you can give that would be in any way meaningful. I would say maybe consider not even responding to that review. As long as you're responding to others and it's clear that this organization is listening, and you've got that little engaged employer, logo, because you get from responding to reviews, or better yet, you've got the open company tag, which shows you're responding to a lot of reviews, you're really using the platform for the conversation. If you're, both of which are free, if you're proving that you can respond to constructive dialogue, I think you're good enough. You can skip some of the rants that there's really no good answer to. People will still see you're engaged.
The reviews that are provided on Glassdoor are not authenticated, right? So some of the questions in here were around how do you deal with trolls, or have you seen any successful strategies in terms of flagging these and getting them taken down?
Yes, excellent question. So the trolls, it can be a bit frustrating. Glassdoor do err on the side of not taking down reviews because it's all about the integrity of the platform and the conversation. But if you can give, again, demonstrable proof of the falsehood, not this time of what they're saying about the organization, but the fact that they're even an employee or something. If there's something in there that would suggest that they're actually not an employee, that can be super helpful. Like we had this one client who has an office, beautiful office, near Central Park. And this review came in talking about Bryant Park. Now, it requires some Manhattan geography here, but one is on 42nd Street, the other is on 59th Street. So we were able to say, clearly this person doesn't even work here. They don't know where the office is. And then reluctantly, because they like to fight back and say, oh, we don't take down reviews, they took it down. Another client had a pretty big ranty, non-true employee review about the selection process, where they said that they were never hired because of rampant age discrimination in the organization. And I was able to flag it to Glassdoor and say, well, if they were never hired, they shouldn't have done an employee review. So it was kind of a technicality, but I even said in the response, if they had done a candidate review, that would have been totally legit, still wrong and false, but they weren't even an employee. So how could you possibly have that person who was never hired doing an employee review? And Glassdoor, again, reluctantly took it down. Other tactics, if you think that there's trade secrets being divulged by a review, then that's worth a shot, and it's particularly compelling if the flag is done by your general counsel as opposed to yourself, and that can be good. It's tough, but it is possible to get some of the trolls off of there.
Yeah. Earlier in your presentation, you talked about how you were creating a feedback loop with your team and continuously asking for information. I think in this event, we've talked a lot about getting feedback from the team. Two questions related to that. Yep. First is, did you ever find that your team started to suffer from what I refer to as survey fatigue? And then secondly, how did you communicate what decisions you chose to take action on versus the ones you chose not to?
Okay. So we were pretty transparent, and I'll answer the second part first. Like I mentioned in the opening remarks, like we had a rationale, and we said, here are the 20 suggestions that came through on, what the team saw as opportunities for improving the employee experience, or for addressing issues. And here's the votes they got, and how strongly people felt about it across offices, across departments. And so those top three, right, in my example, I said there was 4. We couldn't do the first one; it was too expensive. But yeah, here's why we're doing it. It's basically because the people have spoken, and if you really care about number 5, 6, 7, maybe some local solution can be worked out with the department manager, where that was maybe their number 1 thing. So we gave suggestions where more than the top 3 would be potentially resolved the next 6 months, but we had budget, bandwidth that we're going to really level at the things that were going to make most people happy. And then, if you see your thing coming in 5th or 6th, maybe on the next survey, vote for that again, if it really still matters to you. And the people will keep on speaking, and we will keep on responding.
Great.
And then the first part of the question was, remind me, what was it again?
Fatigue.
The first part of the question?
Was around survey fatigue.
Oh, survey, yes. So yeah, we decided to be pretty selective in our surveys, external surveys, like the Glassdoor, I guess, is an external survey. So we decided, okay, there's all these different ones we could do, but we're not going to, because we do a lot of internal surveys, we're not going to subject any team member to more than 2 other surveys per year. So Glassdoor being one of them that we cared about. And then we did Cranes for the New York City office, and thankfully we were on that one 2 years in a row as well. And maybe in Boston we did a different one. But yeah, that was the survey fatigue minimization strategy, was to only go for 2 awards, for any one office.
Got it. What about for somebody who currently has an acceptable profile from their perspective, right?
Yep.
Good ratings, they're happy with the engagement, but they've never really taken on this proactive measure to engage their team. Is it something that you would recommend they make a proactive strategy, or is it sort of like, it's not broken, don't touch it?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's fine until it's not. So maybe you've got a fast-growing company, everyone's happy, Glassdoor looks fine, But still, you're not coming across as a listening organization if you don't respond. So I'd say, that things are looking fine is no excuse to not engage in the responses. And when you do respond, you get the final word. It's a to-be conversation. The person does the review, company responds, and then they can't respond to the response. So this, should be no great fear of that. And then the other thing is, if everyone is happy and maybe just too busy to do a review, you're kind of missing out on an opportunity to build up a bank of good vibes. You've got 5 reviews on there, and you're doing nothing, and suddenly the 6th review comes in, and it's a 1 score, and your average suddenly went from 5 to 4.1 or 4.2. But if you had 20 reviews on there and you get 1 bad one, the impact isn't as drastic. And so, if you've got, when everything is awesome, encourage people to go on there, because something will bump in the night. There'll be a bad quarter, maybe something in your industry, nothing to do with you, and you might be glad you had a bank of goodwill accumulated from the good old days. I think I'm over time. I don't want to monopolize.
I'm going to do one more.
Okay,
one more. So what if you're somebody sitting in this room and you've got an HR team or some managers in your organization that just won't take your Glassdoor rating seriously and don't see it as an impediment to hiring? How do you get them back on board?
So I think one of our keys to success with MediaMath and with clients since is to know when to give up. So the HR team becoming these Glassdoor zealots can become pretty off-putting pretty quickly. So if any particular stakeholder isn't taking the bait, the hiring manager who at that follow-up meeting, you didn't even ask them, follow up, they brought it up to say, yeah, I'm not doing the Glassdoor review thing, I'm just not into it. I'd say, fair enough. Why push it? We want this to be an honest, candid conversation. If they're not willing to find the 10 minutes, ask somebody else. So a big rule of thumb was definitely make it easy for people. Send that hiring manager, that honeymooner, that happy person, the link after the conversation in the hallway or whatever, saying, hey, hopefully you can take action on this. But then we never ask again. So it's like, ask once, ask well, and then let it go. If they do it, they do it. If they don't, they don't. But yeah, I've seen some companies who became, Glassdoor zealots and, hovered over people while they were doing their reviews and stuff. That never ends well. So ask once, make it easy for them to take action, and then let it go.
Wonderful. Peter Phelan, everyone.
Thank you.